morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of the early edition brought to you by Endless Living. And I'm your host, Michael Barnett. Last week, we briefly talked about when the prophecy of Ezekiel 38 might take place. I remember reading the book Left Behind years ago, and I was thinking to myself, Ezekiel 38 happens during the tribulation period, doesn't it? I mean, it says that Israel is a land of unwalled villages. Isn't that symbolic of the peace treaty? So what gives? Why would they have put Ezekiel 38 before the rapture and not after? Well, here's one of the reasons. Ezekiel 38 has no bearing on the rapture, really, just as the tribulation period has no bearing on the rapture. The rapture is a separate event entirely. Now, will the tribulation take place soon after the rapture? It most certainly will, because the Antichrist needs to gain momentum or power before he can confirm the covenant with Israel for 1 week. For 7 years. But to say that the rapture is what ushers in the tribulation is misinformation. There are no ties to the rapture. Let's look back at that timeline detailing the prophecy of the 70 weeks. As you can see, 483 years, or 69 weeks, have already happened. Why is it that we are still waiting for the 70th week? Well, it's kind of like a detonator. When you cut the right cord, the timer stops. Right? Or is that just in the movies? Well, whether a timed bomb, the way the movies make them look, is real or not, the wire connection that links the timer to the detonator was cut, or needs to be cut. Just like that one wire that determines when the detonator is supposed to go off, Jesus Christ is what determines the countdown to his coming. The prophets completely overlooked this whole church age. It's really amazing, but they did. The church is a mystery, and not only is it a mystery, it really has no connections to the rest of prophecy in the Old Testament. You're making a mistake to compare any end-time prophecies to the church because there are none in the Old Testament. The church was a parenthesis in the timeline. When you put a parenthesis into a sentence, you can take it out and the sentence will still make sense. It will still be a complete sentence without that parenthetical statement, but this countdown comes to a halt when Messiah is cut off, not when the church begins. The Jews have no idea that they had killed their Messiah because they rejected him. He wasn't who they had in mind. Whatever your opinions are about God, they are not what defines him. You can say he's mean, unfair, and a bully all you want to, but that doesn't make God who he is. It's all based on Scripture. Jesus was their Messiah. You go to Israel today, and they hate it when you tell them that Jesus was their Messiah. They are absolutely confident that Jesus was not their Messiah. So confident, in fact, that they will embrace Satan's version of the Messiah as their Messiah. But he was cut off, and when this happened, the timeline stopped. And it's not just stopped, it's become unknown. Acts 1:6-7 is one of many places in Scripture where this is made clear. When they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Lord, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? And he said unto them, It is not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father hath put in his power. Jesus even told them that not even he knew when this would take place in Mark 13:32. It is clear that 483 years have already taken place. But we are waiting for the final 7 years. The 70th week of Daniel. Is there anything that the Bible specifies that will trigger this 70th week? The answer is yes, but it's not the rapture of the church. Daniel 9:25 says, Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. Now, let's compare that to our chart detailing the 70 weeks of Daniel. A score is 20, for those of you who are not familiar with that word. It's a word we really don't use today other than scoring points, so many of you might not have known that. So there's 7 weeks, which is 49 years, and then 60, which is 62 weeks. 62 plus 7 is 69 weeks. 483 years. So there's a week missing. Now let's continue with verse 26. And after 62 weeks, or we can say after the 62-week segment of rebuilding, shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. Do you see that last part? Not for himself. This means that it will appear that he did nothing. Now we know that he did a lot of things, but to the Jews, he will have done nothing to meet their expectations of a Messiah. Remember, you can opinionate and speculate and doubt God all you want, but none of that changes who he really is. So when he gets cut off, there's a pause. Let's look at the remainder of the verse. And the people of the prince that shall come. Key word there, friends. It involves future events. Shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Now, you have to pay very close attention to the way that last part is worded. It did not say, and the prince shall destroy the city. No. It said the people of the prince that shall come. This is really cryptic, okay, so bear with me. There are a lot of people who say that Antiochus Epiphanes was the prince that Daniel was referring to, and he indeed did the very things that Antichrist will do in desecrating the temple, but that still does not mean that he was who this verse was talking about. No, it's the people of the prince. That is the nation, the empire, out of which the prince that has yet to come will destroy Israel. And Jesus prophesied this. Israel was scattered to the wind, man. I mean, they were dispersed throughout the world, and the land was wasted. The temple was destroyed exactly the way Jesus prophesied. No stone left unturned. But it was the people of the prince that shall come. He hasn't come yet. As I said already, it is clear that Antichrist will arise out of the revived Roman Empire, or as I always call it, the Yompire. And the people referred to here in this prophecy are the Romans. This has indeed happened. So what about the 70th week? Well, the Bible was clear about 69 weeks, wasn't it? So clearly there's a pause, just as you see in the diagram here. Now let's look at verse 27. And he, who he? The prince that shall come, shall confirm the covenant with many for, what's that say, folks? 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Stop right there. Sacrifice and oblation to cease? I thought the temple was destroyed. It was. But according to this part, there is going to be another temple. When? Once the prince comes. That's what's going to start the 7th week of the 70th week of Daniel. Not the church. It's his signing of the peace treaty. Now, I've got to wind this thing down, but do you see the dilemma we're in right now? Signs of the times are all over the place, but yet we're still seeing the Palestinians doing what they do best. Wasting rockets and starving their people over their obsession to destroy Israel. How on earth is a temple going to be built for the prince to desecrate when we've got these knuckleheads giving Israel so much trouble? These people are not at peace. Well, let's just suppose that the events of Ezekiel 38 do happen before the rapture. Every troublemaker that has been a nuisance to the peace of Israel will be suddenly demolished within 1 hour, practically, almost like Revelation. They will be utterly crippled by this horrible defeat and will lose all momentum and all hopes of taking the land of Israel away from the Jews. Ultimately, the problem will be solved and the road will be paved to knock down the Dome of the Rock once and for all and to build at last the long-awaited third temple. This man who confirms the peace treaty with Israel will be their hero for 3.5 years. A lot can change in the world if these countries were brought to their knees in such a way as only God will get the glory. Politics especially will shift like sand after a firestorm of such vast proportions as is described in Ezekiel 38. Regardless of whether this prophecy is fulfilled before or after the rapture, Jesus is coming very, very soon. Are you ready? I am. And you can be too. Stay tuned to find out how, and I'll see you next time.